Okay, hi everybody. Would you mind taking a moment? Would you turn to the people who are sitting beside you, who are sitting in front of you and in back of you, and would you mind telling them with authenticity and enthusiasm how glad you are that they are part of your team? Go.
Oh my God.
All right, let's come on back together. One thing is really clear to me, that you all really like each other. Is that true? Yeah, excellent. So I am delighted to get to be here with you to talk about being a highly engaged leader, which you already are. I'm so glad to be here with each of you. All of you have one thing in common. We have our most valuable asset. We've all got it. It's the number one thing. What is it? Keep them coming. Keep them coming. What else? Oh, these are so good. Yeah, thanks for just being willing and trying. What else?
Authenticity.
Excellent.
And enthusiasm.
Yeah, there we go. It's all wrapped together into our attention. Are you with me on that? So, and all of us either see our lives as half filled or half empty. We have either rose-colored glasses or broken glasses at times. Your job as leaders is to figure out how not just to motivate yourself and be engaged, but how to do that for others as well. I want to share a story with you. A few years back, someone came into my office and she said, I want to interview you to see if I want you to be my coach. And I was like, great, let's do this. All of you are coaches to others, yes? So I said, what might you want coaching about? And so she sat down with me and she proceeded to say, well, and she was in the C-suite in an organization, and she said, I've just been given the feedback, that F word kind of feedback, just been given the feedback that our organization's morale is in the toilet, and it's my fault, and that I'm a bully. Now, you all know, as engaged leaders, our jobs are to stay curious and not move quickly to judgment, yes? And so I was curious, and so I said the 3 words that you say all the time to learn more when you're curious. It starts with tell and ends with what? More. That's right, tell me more. And so she proceeded to say, well, I was just given this feedback and I think it's not fair. So I said, what? That's right, tell me more. It's not fair. And she said, well, I just went to this conference and I was listening to this presenter who just was talking about how women are judged 3 times more harshly than men in terms of being aggressive or being a bully. Now, as an aside, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just what she shared with me. And I said, okay, interesting. And so she proceeded and she said, and I was so touched by what that person had to say that I was thinking of bringing them to our organization so that everybody could hear this message. Now, are you having the same thoughts that I was having? That's right. So in that moment, we as people who are engaged, we're willing to bring the heart, that authenticity, and we're willing to be honest. I had a moment of thinking, okay, how can I say this the right way? And so I said to her, I appreciate you coming in today, but I'm not going to be able to be your coach. And she kind of gave me that shocked face of like, wait, I'm interviewing you. What are you talking about? What do you mean? And we all know body language speaks loudly, and I stood up, so what does she know she's supposed to do too? Stand up, right? I started walking towards the door. She knows that's what she's supposed to do too. Now, mind you, I'm sweating under my jacket because I was thinking, like, I like harmony. I like getting along. I like being nice with people. And I was about to be really tough. And I said, the reason I can't be your coach is because in everything you just shared with me, I hear no ownership. And you're going to be wasting your time and your money if you come to me and just tell me what's wrong with everybody else. Now, it might be true that you're being judged unfairly or harshly, but I am 100% sure that there is some role in there that you play. And if you're willing to examine and figure out what that part is, feel free to come back to me anytime. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And I closed the door and I sat down. And I thought that was the right move. And the reason I share that story with you is because sometimes we can get off track in terms of paying attention to the wrong thing. So today I'm going to ask that all of you just take the next 45 minutes or so to pause and make a choice. It's pretty common that we're moving at a fast pace. So it's quite a luxury to pause and make a choice. What am I focusing my attention on? What do I want to focus my attention on? And do I want to shift that or change that at all? So I'm curious. In the last year, have you experienced any of these? Just make some noise if you could, like a yes or something if you would say yes to each of these. Ready? Ready? Here we go. Have you experienced staff burnout? Yes. Have you experienced losing staff to travel assignments? Yes. Have you experienced resistance to change? Yes. Have you experienced lack of engagement? Yes. Have you even experienced death? Yes. Have you also experienced commitment to supporting your team regardless of the circumstances? Yes. Have you experienced holding others accountable while also having empathy? Yes. Yes. And then last we've got, have you also experienced optimism for the future? And that's exactly what your organization needs, to recognize things have been hard and we still keep the faith. I'm curious to ask you, what do you focus your attention on? It's common that we are problem solvers. Anyone in here like, you give me a problem, I can solve it in 2 seconds, right? Some of us, we were like, I do that a little bit too quickly. But I want us to think about, what do you focus on and what do you want to focus on? I have a son who just graduated from high school. He's 18 and he's just left the house. Anyone else feeling the same thing? You have kids who are growing. And he just left the house. So you can bet any time that I go out and do people watching and I just notice other people, what do I notice? I notice people who are 4 years old who haven't left the house, right? So I want you to think about, what do you notice when you walked in this room today? What did you pay attention to? Are you paying attention to what's working? Are you paying attention to what's not working? For those of you who are boaters, you know we've got this rudder that kind of steers the ship. And if we shift it just a tiny bit because we pause and we decide how we want to move forward, we can end up in a completely different area a year from now, a decade from now. So I'm going to ask for you to take a moment and write down a number. Would you mind writing down a number on a scale of 1 to 100? How intentional are you these days? 100 looks like this and 0 looks like this. 100 looks like everything I do is with purpose. I'm being thoughtful, I'm being mindful, I'm taking into account all those different things we have to take into account when I'm making a decision, when I'm saying words, when I'm engaging with others. It's about purpose. 0 is, I have no plan, I don't even know what's going to be coming out of my mouth as it's coming out, I'm moving so quickly, I have no time to think. Will you write down a number? Oh, great question. Are we talking life or are we talking work? If it's different for you, write 2 different numbers. If it's the same, just write 1. And for those of you who overthink, you got 3 more seconds. 2, 1. Will you turn to your neighbor and tell them why? All right, let's come on back together. Did anybody say 95 or higher? Take a look around. Doesn't that feel good? To be like, good, it's not just me. So as we're talking today, I'm going to encourage you to figure out, despite the odds, even with the challenges, how do we increase it just by 1%? So you know how at the beginning of the year, there are New Year's resolutions. They say apparently 35% of Americans do this each year. And by February, 45. That's funny. As I said that, I was like, is it 30? Right. And by February, 80% of them are dead. The resolutions, not the people. So I'm going to encourage us to set some goals in a different kind of way. Do we have any of our financial folks in the room? Interesting. So we're just about to start. the fourth quarter of the year, right? On October 1st, it's the last quarter of the year. And I'm going to ask for you to think about, how do you want to show up? What do you want your intention to be for the last quarter? So 10 years ago, when I started my business, I live here in Flagstaff. It's a beautiful place to live, yes. And I started being a coach and a leadership consultant and a trainer. I thought, oh, if I'm going to be a coach, I better get a coach. So I got a coach. And I went and I talked to her. And at the first session, she said to me, she said, Julie, okay, great, let's get to work. So what is your theme of the quarter? And I looked at her kind of like with these big eyes, but kind of with excitement. And I said, that's a great question, and it sounds really exciting, but I have no idea what you mean. Right? I can geek out on that kind of thing. Like, right, I want to learn and grow, but I need more guidance. And she said, well, it's essentially thinking about not just a day, but a chunk of time, right? Maybe 3 months, maybe 4 months. It's flexible. And thinking about, how do you want to show up? What do you want to guide you? What do you want to guide your thoughts? What do you want to guide your decisions? And I thought, that's a great question. And what I decided in that moment was I wanted to have bravery and risk-taking be mine. As I mentioned to you earlier, right, if we're talking as friends, I like to just get along. I like things to be easy. If I do bravery, it's a choice. For some people, they're like, I got to tone my bravery down, right? That's not me. And so she said, as any good coach would say, as any of you would say to your team, if somebody had a goal and we were getting them to be solution-oriented, which is what came up earlier, not just the person who's faceless, right, without the camera, who's complaining and complaining. It's, what's a solution? What's an idea? How are you going to move this forward? She said, okay, so what's an action you're going to take? And I said, okay, great. Well, I know a stage that I could get on where I could talk about bravery and risk-taking. They're always looking for people. I'm sure I could go to them and say, can I talk about this topic? And I did that, and they said yes. And I don't know about you, but any time that I have a goal and I want to get something done, all I have to do is like set the thing I'm going to do, and then I can, right? And then I don't procrastinate, right? Because then I know that thing is coming. So I had the opportunity with this group to talk about bravery and risk-taking. At the end of that, somebody came up to me afterwards and she said, hey, Julie, nice to meet you. And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind coming to my executive team once a quarter and talking about leadership stuff like this. Now you can imagine I was really excited, but trying to like play it cool. I'm more of like the dog personality than the cat personality. So I had to like try and be the cat, like, oh, that sounds nice. And I said, okay, great. What would you want me to talk about? And she said, whatever you want, just once a quarter. And I was like, this is getting better and better. And I was like, and I'm so sorry, I don't know if we've met. And she said, well, my name is Cynthia Sealhammer. I said, hi, Cynthia, nice to meet you. Could you tell me who your team is? She said, I'm the county manager, and so I oversee all of the employees in the county. And I was like, this is the best. And from that moment, I'm sharing this with you because there are certain moments that really matter. That moment that my coach said to me, what's your intention for the quarter, Julie? It changed my entire trajectory so that within the next 5 years, I had then worked with 17 departments within the county just because I was willing to be brave and be clear about an intention and move forward. So I ask for you to take a moment and write down a word or a short phrase. How do you want to show up for this next quarter? What is it for you? It could be absolutely anything. And again, try not to overthink it. You could change your word tomorrow. But if you were to pick today and you had another 18 seconds or so to think about it, go ahead and write something down. And once you've got your thing, will you tell all the people at your table? See if you can just share going around. Tell them your word or your phrase. Go for it. All right, let's come on back together. On the count of 3, can we all say them out loud at the same time? Ready? Ready? All at the same time. Jody, I want to hear you all the way from the back. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Beautiful. That was amazing. I didn't hear any single one. That was great. So now, I want you to think about how could you maybe even ask your team to do the same kind of thing. in life, we have the real opportunity to be clear about how we want to show up. There are a ton of things that are not within our sphere of influence. Are you with me? Like, I wish I could control certain things, but we just don't have that opportunity. We do have the opportunity to think about how we show up. I'm curious, if I was to say 4,000 weeks to you, what's that number about? Who just said that so quick and easily? That's right. It's a lifetime. 4,000 weeks. I don't know about you, when I hear that, it feels very short to me, like only 4,000 weeks? What am I going to do with these 4,000 weeks? Now, is there anybody in the room who is 50 years old and older and you're willing to admit it? Excellent. Okay, great. So those of you who've just raised your hand, you have so much wisdom. You have so much, he's laughing. So much wisdom, so much experience. And one thing we know is that the younger generations, the millennials and younger, do not want your jobs. Have you heard that? And not to say that age has anything to do with position within an organization, but in general, when we're looking at the folks who are less seasoned in the professional world, and we ask them, do you want the jobs of the folks who are more seasoned? They say no. Any guesses as to why? Oh, these are all so good. Thank you for being willing to just guess and try it. They say it's because we and I know we're maybe changing the term from senior leadership, but as senior leaders make their jobs look miserable. That's what the research says. And you might say, not me or not my supervisor. But that's what the research says. It's not because they don't want to work hard. It's not because they're lazy. It's because oftentimes when we get to have the responsibility of leadership, we focus more on the challenges and what's hard than what's so wonderful. The wonderful things are things like getting to make an impact, having our voices be heard, getting to influence others. But we're often talking about how overworked and overwhelmed we are. So with that, I encourage you to think about your 4,000 weeks and think about what leadership presence you want to bring to the table. All of us have a presence. We wish sometimes we could turn it off, yes? Are you ever even today, I wish I could be invisible. Maybe nobody could notice me today. But we are influencing each other all the time. By the way, how you're sitting, you're influencing other people. The way you've talked to your neighbor or not, all the things, you're influencing other people even in this moment. So I'm going to ask for you to stop and pause and reflect for a moment and write down, what does your best self look like? If I was to ask you, is today one of your best days ever? You might consider, is it? I don't know. When was the last time I feel like I had one of my best days? How do you show up? So here are a few questions, if you wouldn't mind writing. So one, what does your best self look like? You might say, well, that was yesterday, or you might say that was 25 years ago. I want you to get as specific as possible. Also, when you are experiencing that, how do you feel? We know that emotional intelligence is an important part of how we show up, yes? Back in the old days, we used to say, check your feelings at the door. Anyone from that old school philosophy? You're like, I've heard that. But now we know it's helpful in reading people. It's helpful in making decisions. So it's important that we also consider our feelings. And then the third one is, what are our attitudes, our actions, and behaviors? Would you just take a moment and write a little paragraph, get as specific as possible? It might even be, well, I'm baking bread. I don't know. Whatever it is for you, write it down. What does your best self look like? In a moment, I'm going to ask for you to turn to one other person or two other people. So whether the table has an odd number of folks or even number of folks. And I would like for you to share this with somebody else. I heard one of you say, this is hard. You're welcome. Right? The opportunity that we take to stop and pause and strategize forward is a really important and valuable one. Do you remember being in 5th grade? And back in 5th grade, we said things like, don't copy me. You remember that? Why was that a thing? It was like, don't copy me, I'm so unique. And then we grew up and we learned that leadership is all only about copying each other. Right? That's what learning is. That's what's being influenced is. So if somebody else says something that you're like, oh, I want to write that down too, feel free. Be influenced by each other. So will you take maybe 1, maybe 2 minutes, turn to one other person or 2 other people, because if you try and do it as a whole table, you won't have enough time. And share with them what you wrote down. Be vulnerable, be willing. Thank you. And are you inspired by the person you just talked to? So exciting. I want you to look around the room for a moment, and I want you to identify for yourself who you think has a really magnetic leadership presence, a really positive leadership presence. Will somebody tell me who comes to mind for them?
I knew I was going to say Tiff.
Tiff? Would you mind sharing with us what you just wrote down? Hey, thank you.
Thank you. I said, I feel like my best self when I'm able to be present, thoughtful, concerned about others, engaged, interested, learning. Ideally, that's in a physical environment where I'm outside and with people that doesn't really care. I'm adding people that I care about, but that's not on the paper.
Beautiful. Can we give her a hand? Awesome. That was so good. Thank you. How about one other person? Great. Who'd you say? Are you willing?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's hard to follow Tiff. I'll just start with that. I said my best self is when I feel supported. I think it provides me energy, and I feel like my attitudes or actions, behaviors are listening and processing, and then speaking, engaging, and adding to others.
Beautiful. Can we give him a hand? Thank you so much for that. Isn't it incredible to take the moment, the pause, to hear from each other? What does your best self look like? Sometimes we forget to stop and do this. And there are folks who are 85 years old who they say, I've never stopped to do this. Homework, should you choose to accept it, is to go and ask other people in this room, what did you write down? How's it going? How frequently do you feel like you get to be that? Do you have any plans for getting back to that? Thank you for sharing that. And we know that being an engaged leader is also and very much about vulnerability, right? Being willing to show up and share ourselves. So I want to share mine with you, just in case you're like, I want some other ideas. So because we know as leaders, we want to also walk the talk. We don't want to just preach. We don't want to just say, here, you do this. So for me, I am also curious, connecting with other people, remembering to take me time outside of work, laughing with my family, being present. Do any of you ever struggle with being present? Me too. Spearheading projects that empower clients to live their best lives and taking risks. I'm going to encourage you also perhaps for the rest of your life, I know that's a long time, but to think quarterly about how you want to show up and remember who you want to be, because when you are living as your most magnetic self, you change the culture of the organization. You're happier, you're satisfied, you're content, you're shining light on other people more and better. But do any of you ever get too busy? Yes. You all better raise your hand, because if not, people are going to be giving you their work, right? And one thing we know when we get too busy is one of the very first things to go is connecting with other people. Is that true for you? That is true for me. I turn into a dictator. Hurry up, get it done. Just tell me what I need to know. Just tell me, right? I'm not nice and like in an email like, hi, how are you? It's straight to the point. 1, 2, and 3. Please get back to me right away. So what we want to be considering is how we show up. if we are going back to the idea of New Year's resolutions, and we're on January 2nd, and we think, I want to be an even more effective, more engaged leader, what do I want to do? Here are some specific strategies that you might choose to do. So first, we've got, in terms of efficiency and organization, getting the right stuff done in the right amount of time, we might hear strategies. Some of these, you might be like, check, I do this, check, I do this. These are current strategies. These are not my ideas. Don't hate me if you hate these. The first is never check email in the morning. Have you ever heard that one? There's even a book with that exact same title. And some of you might want to fight on it. You're like, no, that's what helped. I'm just saying, that's one strategy. They say. Another one is only touch it once. Have you heard that? David Allen, who's the time management guru, he talks about, right, if you get a paper, don't stick it in the pile to deal with later. If it's going to take you 2 minutes or less, deal with it now. Another one is have a strategy session with yourself once a week, perhaps Monday morning, perhaps Friday afternoon, where you sit down and you look at what you've got on your to-do list, on your plate, and you say, what should I keep? What should I take off? What should I change? Another one is standing. They say apparently our brains are 7% more efficient when we're standing. Do you believe that? So there's the idea of standing desks, standing meetings, things like that, right? Here is another bucket of ideas. Setting goals and professional development. They say have a career trajectory conversation with everyone on your team, meaning you go to the people on your team and you ask them, what are some goals you have within the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Where do you see yourself? And I am sure you're not going to retire in this job. I'd like to hear some of your goals. You have to say that because they'll be like, I'm going to be on this team right here doing this forever. If you don't give them permission to say otherwise. Another is have monthly scheduled time to coach your team. For some reason, that's the biggest inquiry that we're getting, that my team is getting these days, is can you teach us how to coach better? Because coaching is not discipline. Coaching is not mentoring. Coaching is not teaching. And so that's another thing. Can we schedule monthly time to coach our team? But all of this will not work if I don't have the clicker because it doesn't plug into the MacBook, so I can't do it with as much effect. I have to go over there and touch. If you aren't authentic, if you're not real and you don't care, the number one thing that your teams are looking for is that authenticity, that you care about them. All of these strategies are just too slick if you're going through the motions. When I first started out, I started with my first client as the Food and Drug Administration in Washington, D.C. And I got to, for 5 years, coach and train 150 of their leaders, their physicians, their statisticians, their epidemiologists, their pharmacologists, and the like. And I was working within the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research within a particular office, but I won't tell you which particular office because then I'm getting too specific. And in that office, I was coaching the folks one-on-one. We'd have these hour-and-a-half sessions, and so I learned a lot about what was going on within this particular office. Just like when you sit down with your folks on your team, you learn a lot about their feelings, how they think about each other, all of those things. And what I was learning is that each person, they were all talking about somebody who was one of the senior leaders. And none of them trusted him. And when I would get curious, right, and I would say, tell me more, thank you, you're right there with me, they would say, it's clear that he's read all of the leadership books. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do, but he just seems too slick, like he's going through the motions. So I want to challenge you to think about strategies, yes, but strategies 20%, 80% heart, 80% care, especially those on your team who are harder to love. You have some of those? Yes, if you don't, just wait. They're coming. They're coming. So I want us to be thinking about one simple strategy. This here says your job as a leader to believe in the potential of their success. So their success, who are sitting here with you, and their success, the people who aren't here today that you are representing. You know, Jocko's team, extreme what? Extreme ownership. They say that the second tenet is to be simple, right? The Navy SEALs, they're saying simplicity. This is what I want you to put on the top of your computer screen, tape it to your stethoscope, put it on your bathroom mirror, whatever you need to do. And we are especially talking about the people who are harder to love, because there are some who are your shining stars and you're like, yeah, I've got this. But there are others that trigger you, are more challenging, need more work, yes? Have you ever had a supervisor that didn't feel this way about you? If you have had that, what's the feeling? How do you feel whenever you're with them? It doesn't have to be anything to do with what they're saying to you, but it's just the kind of sense. How do you feel when you know this is true, when they don't believe in the potential of your success? Just yell it out. Not valued, disengaged. Say it again. Not seen. So your challenge is to figure out how to do this with each of your people. However you feel on the inside, it shows up. It doesn't matter if your words are different. It will sneak through the cracks. So how can we believe in the potential of their success? Now, as I mentioned, whenever we're too busy, the care tends to go away. A few years back, I got to be a participant in the Flagstaff Leadership Program, like Adele is in right now. Do you know Adele? Yeah? Great. One of my strengths is I'm a great eavesdropper, and I was like, oh, Guardian Air. I just got to facilitate the retreat for FLP, and then I met Adele, and then a Guardian. Okay, so, and one day, anyone done the Flagstaff Leadership Program? Handful of folks, 3 maybe. And each day, in the morning, there's a check-in. 27 people sitting in a U. Each person shares for 30 seconds, a minute, how they're doing, right? Anybody can say anything. And it's interesting because we care about each other. And to have a designated time where we're learning about each other is really helpful in terms of morale and rapport and all of that. And I remember the one morning, I started noticing so many people are saying how busy they are. They're using the B word, right? They're using the actual word busy. They're not just alluding to it. And so then, I don't know if any of you like to geek out on data and tracking. So then I started tracking in my notebook. Anytime someone would say the word busy, so I do a little tick mark. But I only got to do it for the last 8 people. I wasn't quick enough from the beginning to be like, let me do this study. How many people of the 8 do you think somehow in their report of how they're doing said busy? All. I wish it was all, because it would make a better story. But if I'm being authentic and honest, it was 5. But still, that percentage is extremely high when that was not the prompt. So I'm going to encourage you to start thinking about, what else are you other than busy? Because if you want to shift the culture where people are not just thinking about, I'm so busy, aka overwhelmed, and this is why, it starts with you. So I want you to think about and write down. I won't make you share this one. What else are you? You are busy, probably, yes, but what else are you? And I mean a positive. What else are you? If I was to say what's going on for me right now, I would say learning. So the next time when, what's your name? Tom. Hi, Tom. The next time when Tom comes up to me and says, Julie, how are you? I would be like, Tom, I am learning a lot right now, and let me tell you how. If you want to shift your culture or be an influencer, in your culture, it starts with you doing something a little bit different, and then people pick up what you're putting down, and they're like, oh, I like it. How can we focus on what we are other than just busy? Because it is part of the air we breathe. Will you read this out loud with me? Oh, no, wait. I thought it was the very next slide. Wait. Okay, it's one. I'm going to do it. Will you read this one out loud with me? This is said by Gandhi. We're all going to say this together. Ready? Your
thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny.
That was beautiful. It kind of sounded like you were in church. So what we think matters. If we think we're so busy, we're going to go around every day, every hour, I'm so busy, I'm so busy, I'm so overwhelmed. If we are thinking, I only 60% trust that person, it's going to show up. We're going to look for more evidence of that. So I want us to be thinking about how can we shift, perhaps, just a little bit, to be even more intentional, especially with those folks who are harder to love. Now going backwards one. Why do I have this slide here? What is this? Why is this here?
This is on our engagement survey.
Excellent. This is on your engagement survey, and this is something you want to work on. Yes? As an organization, this is something you want to work on. But this takes a ton of, you brought it up earlier, humility and looking within. Because like that person at the beginning that I was sharing about who said, that's not me, who wasn't taking the ownership, didn't have the opportunity to recognize where she could be empowered to make change. So I'm going to ask for each of you to think about one specific thing that you personally can do differently, one shift that you can make so that even just one person within your organization feels more respected. I might encourage you to think about the times when you're the most stressed. What could you do differently? I might encourage you to think about one particular person and how you could show up differently with them. But I'm going to ask for you again to take a moment and write down a concrete action that ties into this that you might do once we leave this room today. Is anyone feeling extra brave? We brought up the topic of bravery earlier, and willing to be vulnerable. And wouldn't mind sharing with us right now what you just wrote down? Thank you. Please, will you just yell it?
Sure. Listen to understand rather than jump to solutions or have a predetermined answer.
Fantastic. Who's with her? Who's like me too? I could do that more. Yes. Sometimes it's a real benefit to be a quick thinker, and I don't have a lot of time, I already know a solution, and to not be wishy-washy and not feel overwhelmed by the choices, and to just pick quickly, and sometimes it's not. Thank you. Beautiful. What else?
Say people's names when I say hi to them.
Fantastic. Saying people's names when I say hi to them has people feel heard, known, seen. And if you feel shy because you're like, I'm not sure if I totally have got their name, it's okay to mess it up and just to keep trying. What else? Thank you.
Truly listen and seek feedback.
Oh, truly listen and seek feedback. One of my favorite topics is seeking feedback. If you all are like, I would like feedback, and you're only asking, what am I doing well and what could I do differently? You're not taking full advantage of the opportunity to seek feedback. Get crystal clear. For example, can I ask you, what's your name?
Luann.
Hi, Luann. Luann, would you mind sharing with us, what's one of your growth areas? Meaning, sometimes we say weaknesses, but growth areas meaning you're like, I want to improve this. I don't think I'm perfect at this yet. Sometimes it's hard for me. What would you say?
Probably delegating more.
Beautiful. Who's the same? Who's like, I could delegate more. Sometimes we say, I don't because it's hard to trust. Sometimes it's hard for me to slow down and take the time because it takes a lot of time at the beginning and then it gets better. To ask specifically about that. To go to Tom and say, Tom, I'm working on delegating. I don't think I'm very good at it right now, or I want to get better. Will you tell me what's your experience of me with delegating? What am I doing well? What can I work on? to get specific like that. Then people are going to give you real answers. If any of you have ever asked for feedback and you're like, they're not really telling me, it's typically because the quality of our questions is not good enough. Luann, thank you so much for that. So I'd like for you to keep thinking about that. Also, one of your other topics is the confidence in senior leadership, yes? I heard this being talked about earlier, and so I think you're so on the right track. The idea of we can't, in any moment, throw senior leadership under the bus. We can't throw another department under the bus. We can't throw another person under the bus. Sometimes HR in organizations gets thrown under the bus. Sometimes IT gets thrown under the bus. They're making us do this. I'm sorry, everybody, but we just have to. If you are doing that, figure out how to change it. So earlier it was asked, it was said, well, sometimes if we don't understand the why, get brave, go ask. If you can't figure out the why, at least the why could be, well, I bet they've thought about it some. And we're just going to trust that they had some reason. Let's try it out. We've got this. So if we are going back to the idea of our attention, I'm going to ask for you to think specifically about you right now, meaning you, uniquely you. Sometimes as leaders, we're thinking so much about other people. And I'm going to ask you to do the favor of write a circle in your notebook. And I'm going to ask for you to divide it up into 4 quadrants. In terms of how you spend your energy right now, let's say, back to Jocko's idea that simplicity is king or queen. There are 4 components of your life. You ready for what they are? 1 is your career, pretty crystal clear, how you spend your time, usually making a living. The second is your health, your physical health. We're going to say that means sleep, nutrition, exercise. Then we've got relationships, colleagues, intimate, family, friends. And then we have a 4th one, which is self. That's about leisure time. That's about spirituality. That's about fun. That's about professional or personal growth. Would you mind, on your circle that you just drew, divide up your circle into quadrants about how much energy you spend right now these days in each of those quadrants. Go ahead. Take 10 seconds. In a moment, I'm going to ask for you to yell out which one has the biggest slice of the pie and which one has the smallest. You ready for the biggest? 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, somebody said relationships. Yes. Lots of career. Which one was the smallest for you, everybody? Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. There was some trending there, right? Self, how interesting. Now will you draw another circle? Above that first circle, will you write now or present? Above the second circle, will you write future? And I'm going to ask for you to create it how you want it, but what also is possible. And future does not mean 15 years from now when I'm retired. Future means sometime within the next 6 months. How can you create it how you want it, but also what's possible? And once you've got it done, will you tell your neighbor what changed? All right, let's come on back together. Did anybody's not change? Didn't change? Fantastic. So everybody afterwards, you're going to go accost her. And you're going to be like, tell me how, teach me the way. Which quadrant grew for you? Who said career? Interesting. Who said health? That one increased. Great. Who said relationship? That one increased. And who said self? That's the most popular one. So homework again, should you choose to accept it, go ask each other, how's it going with that? Because the time is never going to be perfect. And if you want to show up as an engaged leader and change your organization to be one where everybody is fully engaged, it starts here. It starts with you taking care of yourself, so that you can show up better for others, and showing other people that it's okay to do that also. So I want you to think about where you are focusing your attention and where you want to focus your attention. A few years back, I went to a conference in Tucson that was called The Science of Well-Being. And at that time, they shared that we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts every day. Do you believe that? That sounds exhausting, doesn't it? But we do. And they said that 95% of what we think, they're the same top 10 tunes. Do you believe that? Just on repeat, repeat, repeat. So are you thinking about what you want to be thinking about, or do you want to shift that? Are you focusing more on the positive? Are you focusing more on the negative? I mentioned feelings and emotional intelligence before. Danielle Laporte is an author who she talks about goal setting specifically about feelings. How do I want to feel during the day? She says if we have a goal of like wanting to buy hardwood floors or something like that, it's actually because we want to feel a certain feeling. So I'm going to encourage you to just keep thinking about, how do I want to feel? If we are thinking about how many pieces of information come across our desk or across our lives every day, there are a few different studies on this, but I'm going to go with this one. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the author of the book called Flow, he says that 2 million pieces of information are coming at us in any given moment. It's a lot, right? I would love to know how they studied that, how they figured that out, but right now, you're feeling that little bit of breeze from the enormous fan. You're feeling how it feels to have your feet on the floor. You're hearing my words, you're hearing the breath of the person next to you, whatever it might be. 2 million, but we filter out, and that we can train ourselves to focus on certain things. You know the folks who are Eeyore, right? You've heard that analogy of Eeyore, he's a donkey, is that right? Yeah. In the Winnie the Pooh, who's just focused on like how things won't turn out well. Well, we have the opportunity to filter out so much because we can't pay attention to all of it, so that we only pay attention to 184 bits of information. So what do you want to be focusing on? What do you want to be paying attention to? Sometimes we go to judgment instead of curiosity. If I was to ask each of you to get out your pen, which I won't, but I could, and ask you to draw. And if I was to ask you to draw a deer crossing sign, you probably have already driven past multiple ones of those today. Or a school crossing sign, right? You say, there's a school here. Could you do it perfectly? And probably not, unless we are those sign and those road engineers. And the reason I share that with you is because we all focus on different things. If you have folks on your team who you're like, I already told them this, why aren't they doing it differently? I've already said what's important to me, why aren't they changing? Or why don't they just know? You're supposed to come to meetings on time every time, don't you know that? It's because we pay attention to different things. So here's, right, specifically what these look like. We pay attention to different things. Years ago, I used to be the Dean of Education at this small college, and I got to be the Master of Ceremonies one day when we had all the graduates coming across the stage, and it was powerful. We had specifically IT, computer graduates, and medical graduates. And they, we had the pomp and circumstance, and we've got the music, and they're walking down the aisle, and their family members are there, and it was incredible. And so then I was ready. I was ready to have my moment to give them this most inspiring speech, standing on stage that was going to change their lives, right? Have you ever felt like that? Like, I really want to make an impact. Can I have my Steve Jobs speech, or can I have my Oprah Winfrey speech? Here I go. And so I started with a twinkle in my eye, and I started to talk, and I got 5 seconds in. And someone who was on the stage behind me, right, there was a row of other folks sitting back there, she said, psst. And for some reason, we all know what psst means. And I was like, are you kidding me? We try and take in a lot of things when we're paying attention, right? When we're engaged. And I was like, okay, I'm watching, I'm like trying to give my speech out this way, but she's saying that. So I quickly turn and she does this to me. And I thought, I have no idea what you're trying to communicate. So I turned back around, got 4 more seconds in, and this time she says, Julie. And I was like, are you kidding me? So I turned back around, and this time she had words, and she said, you may all be seated. And I did the like slow turn back around, looking out at the crowd, and like, are you kidding me? There were 1,000 people in the audience, really 1,000. 1,000 bits of information letting me know that these poor folks have been left standing, and then they're all so polite that nobody has tried to sit down because I haven't said the words that you're supposed to say in a ceremony of, you may all be seated. So finally I was quick and I was like, you may all be seated. And there was this giant collective sigh, like, like thank goodness, because we thought we were going to be standing for the next 20 minutes. I share that with you because we could have information right in front of our faces and not notice. So how can we give each other grace, and try again? How can we continue to stay engaged, even when it's hard? How can we continue to help other people to be engaged, even if it seems like they don't want to? We pay attention to different things, and sometimes we don't do the best with what we're paying attention to. If you are the kind of person who's like, I want takeaway strategies, like what can I use after walking out of here today? I want to share these with you, things we've already talked about so far. You can write these down. If you're like, what can I replicate with my team once I walk out of here? What can I do? That's right. Feel free to take a picture. So you could talk with your team about what's your unique leadership presence. Any of this, any of what we're talking about today, you can blame on today. Right? If you're like, I don't want to take the credit, I don't want to have too much ownership of like, hey, everybody, we're going to do this. You can say, we were just having this meeting and homework I'm supposed to do is ask everyone this. The second is those 6 leadership strategies that were of these won't work unless you're authentic. You can share those. You can ask your team, what are you other than busy, and ask to change the culture together. You can ask each to examine their lives. Right? Home and life are definitely connected. And you could ask them where they put their attention, where they want to put more of their attention. Engaged leaders like you are always looking to learn. You're looking for places to learn and then how to implement. So here are some ideas for you. So just a couple more thoughts for you. So going back to Jocko's idea of simplicity. This is a strategy, this is a tool I want to leave you with. Do any of you know this already? So this 5-to-1 rule comes from Dr. John Gottman. And what he says is that for every 1 negative interaction, we need to have 5 positive ones with other people. If we want to be able to make a withdrawal in the emotional bank account every once in a while, like give someone some corrective feedback, some constructive feedback, we have to have had 5 positive engagements with them already. So that forces us to have a positivity mindset, right? A growth mindset, looking for what's working, because we need to focus on that 5 times more than the negative. So I'm going to ask for you to get really concrete and specific. Will you write down the name of one person who is not your shining star, who's just really easy to engage with and that kind of thing? I want you to write down the name of one person who you'd like to practice this with once you leave today. It can be in your professional life. It can be in your personal life. Just write down the name of one person where you're going to try and shift it to have a higher ratio of positive to negative. And if you then want to tell your neighbor, you can. Great. So this guy, John Gottman, is anyone familiar with him? He is actually a relationships expert. This works in your professional life, in your personal life, but this is a mindset. Even I've had the opportunity to work with Head Start across northern Arizona. This is something they even do with their preschool students. This is a mindset. This is a way of thinking. And it's really, when we do it, it shifts the rudder. And we have more positive experiences than negative. So as I'm starting to wrap up, I want to share a few things. We first were talking about our mindset. Then we were talking about you specifically, right? You in your life. And then just a moment ago, we were talking about others, right? Other people who you want to shift how you engage with them. Now I want us to talk about your team for a moment. Will you all write down a number on a scale of 1 to 100? What's the morale of your team? And if you're like, well, I'm on like 3 different teams, what team are you talking about? You just pick. 100, so 1 to 100. 100 looks like the most positive morale that has ever existed on any team. You could take your show on the road. You could teach all other organizations. Everybody on your team jumps out of bed and is sad when it's not work time. 0 looks like everybody hates each other. Everyone's looking for a new job. There's no honesty. There's tons of gossip. 0 to 100. Write down a number. Okay, in a moment, I'm going to ask for you all to say it all together. Any number is okay, because this is also just perspective. This is something you could also do with your team, right? To ask them, how do you think our morale is? And then the real question you want to ask them is the second one, which is, if somebody says, I think it's 2, or somebody says, I think it's 92, it's okay, great. What are we doing well? Meaning, why wasn't it 0? And how could we move it 1 decimal higher? Everybody ready to share your number? 3, 2, 1, hit it. 85. Oh, so interesting. I hear a bunch of 80s in there. If you're wanting strategies for improving team dynamics, here are 2 simple ones. FORD, as an acronym, this stands for Family, Occupation, Recreation, and Dreams. If you want to develop relationship with people, this is a customer service strategy, but we know everybody is our customer, right? A customer is somebody who cares about us doing our job well. So first, do you know about their family? Do you know how old their kids are if they have kids? Do you know if they have pets? Do you know their pets' names? The second is occupation. That's kind of easy here, but also, do you know where they worked before they came to you? Do you know how long they've been with the organization? The third is recreation. What do they like to do for fun? Are they going to go hike Humphreys this weekend or go to the spa in Sedona? And the last one is dreams. And you might think dreams is one of the harder ones, but dreams are goals. What do people want beyond this moment? And if you think, my team doesn't talk about this, you go first, right? Leaders show up and they say, I'm willing to share with you. One time I was working with a group who, somebody said, it was amazing. Someone said in the group, could you give an example of dreams? And I was like, sure. Thinking. And then somebody in the group who I had worked with previously said, Julie, how's it going with your pull-ups? And I was, in that moment, I felt utter love. And just in case you're like, what does that have to do with anything? I had a goal of being able to do 1 pull-up. And I shared it with some people, and it started simply. Pull-ups are very hard. Are we aware of this? And so I started working with a trainer. I want to do 1 pull-up. And we started with, I would hang on the bar and do this. That was the whole exercise. Anyway, and so I had come further. And so this person asked, Julie, how's it going with your pull-ups? And so I was able to share with them, this is how it's going. And I'm totally killing it. And it's so exciting. So I would encourage you to write this stuff down about your people. We wish we could remember. We can't remember all the things. But when you take the time to say, hey, how was it that you're doing this? People feel love. They feel cared about, and that's what we're going for. The other idea is, can we get in the flow state as absolutely much as possible? The flow state meaning I'm feeling engaged. The clock, the minutes start to, I'm not paying attention to that. I'm like really vibing with whatever's going on. I'm really enjoying what we're doing. This feels so good and so right. Can you have more moments in your day where it doesn't feel like pushing rope? Where it feels like this feels really great and I'm loving this. And can you have your people experience that too? These two simple things. As I'm getting ready to leave you, I'll leave you with one story. And first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be here with all of you. I am so inspired by how you're taking the time out to celebrate what's going on, and I would love to hear from you and hear how things are going as you're progressing. As I was the Dean of Education at that small college, there was one day that I was sitting at my desk, and I was probably doing 10 different things at once because I have to work really hard to not, right? There's a chance that I could be like responding to an email and listening to a webinar and I don't know, maybe doing the like little exercise thing under the desk at the same time. And somebody walked in my office and said that really hilarious question that sometimes people say, which is, exactly, are you busy? No, I've just been waiting for you. Thank you so much for arriving. And, right, but I know that's just a phrase we use, and they really mean, do you have a minute for me? And so I lied and said, no, not at all, come on in. But we know that really means, come on, I'll take the time. And I had to physically, is anyone else also like this? Turn myself away from the computer because I'm like, I'm halfway through a sentence. I don't want to stop, but I need to stop. That would be the right and respectful thing to do. So let me stop, turn towards you, right? And like, okay, yeah, great. What do you need help with? What do you need? And we talked about something. Now, this is the interesting thing to me. I don't remember at all what we talked about. I don't remember the content of the conversation, but I remember what was said at the end because it gave me a feeling, and it gave me that feeling of love, of care. At the end of the conversation, she said, Julie, I just want to tell you that I so appreciate that whenever I come to talk to you, you make me feel like the most important thing that you have to do all day is talk to me and listen to me. So I just want to thank you for that. And I took that compliment and wrapped it all around me, and I hold on to that because my nature, my way, when I'm not being careful, when I'm not being intentional, is to go, get things done and forget about the people and how much it means when we care about them. So with that, thank you again so much for letting me be here with you. I appreciate everything you're doing, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, everybody.